Hi, and welcome to Couch Theater. I'm Stefan, a host of the show, and this week I'll be joined by Greg, our creative consultant. Basically, what we're trying to do with this show is spread the love of movies. There are movies that are out there that you already have access to, and we just want to share them. Now, afterwards, we talk about them just like a group of friends would.
We want to tell you about the movies we like.
That's correct.
Hopefully you like them too.
Yeah. Well, we want to share that love for movies with other people.
Yeah. Speaking of which, you're going to share some love with me today.
That's right. So today we are going to watch a movie called Other Life. Came out last year, 2017. It's Netflix, actually.
Good stuff.
And just as a heads up, this is a piece of candy episode.
Piece of candy.
Yeah, we're simple movie. You know, I'm not going to claim that it's fantastic, that it's something you're going to watch 10 years down the road and say, wow, that was a classic. But this movie is a lot of fun, and it touches on some really interesting things, and it's well worth a watch, you know, if you have the time.
All I know about this movie is that it's called Other Life, and I walked in on someone watching this movie, and I saw a scene with snow in it. So that's all I know about this movie. So
there is snow in this movie.
All right, I'm prepared.
There's snow at some point.
I'm prepared. So tell me about this movie a little bit.
Well, that's the thing. I suppose I never like to spoil things, and I think I'll let you fall into it. But it's a sci-fi.
Okay. Oh, I didn't.
And I'd say it's not almost. It is in the vein of a Black Mirror episode.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you haven't watched Black Mirror yet, that's also on Netflix. It's like the Twilight Zone on meth. It's
like dark reflections of ourselves.
Yeah, the darkest you've
That's
ever
why it's
seen.
called Black Mirror, right?
Yeah, right. Darkly reflected. Black Mirror, the name comes from when you turn off your television or your phone and you see yourself reflected in it.
Yeah.
Because it's all about technology and how it affects us socially, how we're going to see that change profoundly, exploding in the next several decades. We've already seen it. And how intense and crazy that's going to be. And this is in that same vein. It's about technology. And we've talked about this before in sci-fi, where the best sci-fi, I mean, there's different forms of sci-fi. There's the kind where, like, Blade Runner, you know, it takes place in the future. And there's flying cars and robot...
It's a complete
human hybrids.
It's like a fantasy world that you're being thrust into. A
whole world.
That you don't identify
new
with.
World. And right. You can't identify it because it's just so crazy.
It's fantastical.
But just like any other fantastical genre, you know, it makes you look at humanity. Gives you a different window into humanity. And the other end of sci-fi is... We've talked about this before.
Oh, yeah,
the best form of sci-fi is when they take one tiny thing, and that changes everything. They just focus on that tiny but profound change.
Yeah, you're still living in the world that we do here, but it's just tinted a little bit by this profound change. Like Children of Men, I think is really cool. As a sci-fi, because like, yeah, the cars like look a little more futuristic, but like not really. And the buses have like TVs in them and stuff. Like, sure, that's fine. But that
minuscule changes,
very subtle changes that they don't focus on.
Realistic,
yeah. But the big change in that movie is obviously the people can't have children anymore.
Right.
And it just says, all right, how would that change the world we know?
And this is very similar, except it's more like a technology has been created, and it's been created by a couple people who are trying to sell it. So it's a starting company.
Okay.
The implications of the technology are just like amazing. And the more they get into it, the more you're like, it's just mind-blowing. So I think that's as much as I'll tell you about the movie. I was trying to think of things to keep in mind, like frame of mind type of stuff, which I usually like to do right before a movie, and I really couldn't come up with anything. There's nothing really to prepare you for in this movie other than what we just talked about, which is, it's a sci-fi and it's one specific thing. It takes place in modern day.
See what a technology like this would do to us.
See where it takes you. We talked about fantasy last week and how you have to suspend disbelief in magic, basically, to appreciate the fantastical. Yeah. The nice thing about this is that, even though it is fantastical in the sense of technology, it's not something we may not see it in our future, but it's not impossible, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
And then once we get back, we can relate it to, there's one Black Mirror episode that it's very, very like.
Well, we'll see if I've seen that one, because I'm not caught up.
What are you doing with your life?
Yeah.
Well, otherwise, I hope you enjoy Other Life. We're about to go watch it right now. I'd say the acting is pretty good. The storyline goes a little bit crazy.
Cool.
At a certain point, but yeah, it's a wild ride. So we're gonna go watch Other Life right now on Netflix. Hope you join us afterwards for a talk. All right, so we're back. Wow.
Wow, indeed. I really enjoyed that.
Well, I'm glad you did.
I had a great time with it.
I think, what's crazy is that this movie on IMDb, it has like a 6 or something.
All right.
Maybe 6.5. I'm not sure why this didn't get more attention, honestly. I think it deserves a lot more.
With the pace that Netflix throws movies out there, a lot of them don't get really talked about until enough people have watched them, It's just, there's so much content out there for something to be discovered and then talked about. It takes a little while. This very well may be a movie that people talk about, because it's really well put together.
Agreed. I mean, there's a lot of reviews out there, and I haven't actually read any of them, but the basic tagline is they felt that it fell short, where it wasn't very captivating, which I felt the exact opposite.
I was enthralled the whole time.
Yeah. So let's first talk about the implications of the technology itself.
Yeah.
I mean,
first off, yeah, what a fascinating take on the holodeck, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, exactly. Right. Man, do I wish the holodeck existed.
Oh, everyone does. It's interactable fantasy.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're not a Star Trek fan, which I mean, you should be, but
you know what the holodeck is. Come on, right?
Doesn't everyone? But if you don't, I mean, it's basically a room which is interactive VR.
Yeah.
But it's just a projection.
You can create whatever kind of holographic reality you want in front of you, and you can interact with it.
So exactly like this, except
this
you
one
don't have to put anything in your eye.
It's not a room. You have to, it goes on in the mind.
In the mind, the room of the mind.
Yeah.
But as far as the different areas that they could apply it to, I mean, they use it. They go to solitary confinement, which would definitely be a thing. But I mean, everything else. It could change how we learn things.
Yeah.
How people do technical jobs. I mean, what if you wanted to become a surgeon?
It's immortality.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Right. I mean, she's logging 480 hours a day, and then they come to find out that she's logging twice that amount. So she's almost doing 1,000 hours a day inside this simulation that she's created, which is just as real, just as many memories implanted in your mind. 1,000 hours a day for who knows how long she's been doing this. She has lived another life.
Yeah.
Basically. And it's no surprise that she becomes Neo in the end. I'm surprised she doesn't fly away, at the end of the movie.
Well, she's dealt with broken code internally so many times, it seems, when she, in the beginning of the movie, when the snowboard vision experience is playing out, and she gets stuck in it. She just tells herself, it's just code, and she lets it ride out, you know?
But her resolve in that is just amazing. I mean,
No, yeah,
6
like,
days she's in this like fractal nonsense of snowboard land, and I mean, you know, if it was just repeating over and over, it wouldn't be the end of the world because you'd just be snowboarding for 6 days. But it clearly got corrupted,
yeah.
and she was in nonsense land, which is like a bad trip, basically.
Yeah.
For 6 days.
And she comes out like, all right, let's go give a presentation right after.
Yeah, no, right.
Like,
she
right
steps
after that,
out,
yeah.
she gives a presentation, she comes back and fixes the code and says, okay, let's run it again.
Yeah.
The tenacity of her character is powerful. But, I mean, at the same time, they really show why she has that tenacity, right?
Yeah, they give her that motivation. Well, family, the family context, her dad, you know, has been working on this technology we find through her, what we later find out is a dream, but also through that drive to save her brother, you know?
Right.
And that's a great motivation for a character to be working on a technology like this. And
she's very guilt-driven, it seems. Yeah. And, I mean, that's even raised to the next level when she ends up killing her boyfriend, which we don't really know if that happens until after the end, after the final twist is revealed, where she, you know, she's been in she actually was in the simulation the whole time, but she broke out in her mind, broke out of the cell in her mind to create a whole nother life. And I loved that because it showed exactly what was going on, how she was perceiving the world, all of her desires, all of her wants, and her fears. So
who she did trust and who she didn't trust.
Right. Because when she breaks out of the cell, and even though it's still a simulation, she creates this world where her partner, who comes off as her boss a lot of the time, has placed her there. And her lead coder is also in on it too.
He's complicit.
And, yeah. He's the spineless asshole, whereas her partner is maniacal. And
he's
conniving.
A Time Lord.
Right.
He's getting all the glory we see on the magazine cover.
Right.
You know?
All of that.
He's
happy to take the credit for everything, whereas she's never been really interested in taking the credit. She's doing it for another reason.
Yeah, but all of that, the part after she breaks out of the prison, that's all a projection of the way she perceives her life thus far. So the fact that her partner / boss is taking over control is because that's the way she feels. You know, he's the one who tells her no to things like, no, you can't have more mainframes. No, we can't do that. It's like he's the one who has to deal with the business side of things, the reality of it. She's stuck in the code land, the fantasy land of trying to work through this problem and everything, you know. That's kind of where that power differential comes from, and she doesn't trust his motivations because hers are pure in her mind.
Well, what I thought was really interesting as far as the boss doing something that terrible, putting her in a box, she was right. He, in the end...
She was right to not trust him, yeah.
He did end up putting her back in the box to fulfill his own greed. You know, and the lead coder was also complicit in that.
No, exactly, yeah.
Full well knowing that she may be stuck in there for a year plus in her mind of new memories.
The truths expressed in the subconscious mind are pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So what else? We'll forget the friend, Cass. She didn't seem very important.
Another one she seems to trust, though.
But yeah, clearly she seemed to trust him like a sister almost. But then the boyfriend. I loved how she brought him back to life. Like...
Oh, I didn't really kill you. You can still help me.
Yeah.
You're still...
Right.
Everything's okay.
Wouldn't that have been nice if it was all just this grand conspiracy? But then she kills her brother.
She wakes him up, but we see in that vision he chooses to go walk into the water. Well, he accepts his fate, and that's kind of what he's telling her to do. Accept the fate that I'm gone.
Talk about the acting in this movie. Lots of great acting, but for this guy, he had like 2 lines, and then the rest was just like sleeping. And then that look, the looks that he gives are haunting, kind of zen almost at the end, where he looks at her like, knowingly, like, I've been to death.
There's a deep knowing in the way he looks, yeah.
Right, and he chooses not to come back. He chooses to go into the ocean, which is, pretty...
I definitely love the fractal aesthetics throughout the movie. That was really interesting, very psychedelic, very fun.
Yeah.
Some of them got like super salvia trippy, and then there was like the DMT stuff at the end. And,
I know. The nod to DMT security was very funny.
A little on the nose for me, but it was pretty funny.
I feel like DMT is fairly well known, but not super well known. So I mean, it's a psychedelic drug. I don't know much more than that. I know that they can make it out of plants, but it's natural. Apparently, it mimics something in the brain that we use during sleep.
Potentially, the science is a little hazy on that. It's posited that the pineal gland produces DMT to produce visual experience, potentially, but also could flare up for more dreamlike states. So, like when you take DMT extract, it's like, really activating that part of the brain.
Taking it to the next level.
Or potentially actually taking you somewhere else and meeting other entities.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I really appreciated the psychedelic angle on the movie. Gave it a very genuine perspective, and the way they talked about the subconscious and everything, it felt like they really understood what they were talking about in the movie. Especially the way that her breakout sequence really was a reflection of herself. I felt like the writers understood what they were doing and were getting the message that they wanted to get across.
Well, to touch on that, so there was this balance between what is the definition of the brain? Is it a computer that can be coded? Or is there something more to it? And it seemed like they didn't really want to touch on the spiritual. In fact, she calls her dad out and says, "Oh, the spiritual nonsense."
Rational. Yeah.
And he says, "Don't belittle my words," because he doesn't see it as spiritual, but he sees it as complex to the point that it can't be coded in ones and zeros. It's not binary.
Or simply explained to his daughter.
Right.
It's not something that you can just use words to get across.
Mm-hmm.
And we see a theme like that mimicked at the end. Why that solitary confinement is so bad. She couldn't tell her partner why that was so awful and
he had
how
to experience
an awful
it
thing
for
you
himself.
just did to me. He had to experience it for himself to understand.
Well, and I thought it was interesting, when I just noticed it in this viewing. At the very end, when he's at day 365, he's sitting there, zen-like, cross-legged, waiting for the final day to pass, just like she was. Like, it's almost if the mind has to go to that place just to survive. There's some sort of survival aspect where you just need to control your thoughts. Otherwise, you're going to go insane. And then, of course, it passes day 365, goes back to 1, and he loses it, just like she did.
Yeah.
And then there were a couple nods to it, like the brain as a computer, like when they eventually do let the brother go, his son, her brother, they unplug him like he's a computer. That's the only instance I can think of off the top of my head, but I like that.
Well, I mean, they talk about these experiences being just like software and everything. It's just it's just code.
It's just code, yeah.
I mean, the brain is a kind of computer, but it's just one that's infinitely complex.
Well, and I mean, you said at the end where we realize it's 2017 because we're looking at the casket, and it says, he was 1987 to 2017. You're like, it's actually 2017? Oh, unbelievable.
Right.
If it was 2022, then I'd believe it.
Yeah, because
5 years from now, maybe.
Dude, the rate at which the world changes these days, just like the rate at which Netflix produces content. I had no idea what this movie was or that it was out. It came out last year, and I'm like, wow, this is a great movie. The rate at which things happen these days, you don't know what's going to pop up at any given moment. Yeah. It's just, there's so much going on in the world.
Perpetual present shock.
Exactly. I love that Rushkoff theory.
Basic ideas, we're living in the future and things happen so fast that it's hard to keep up with anything.
Yeah.
The new things that come out it's hard to continuously blow your mind when everything you see in science is so fantastical already.
And it also speaks to the power of nostalgia because it's a grounding thing.
How do you ground yourself?
Tie back to when life moved at a normal pace. You know?
Yeah. I think we're like the last generation that actually saw that, honestly.
I know.
Stability, sort of.
I mean, when I was a kid, it felt like the old world.
The old world.
The old world in that
you're right.
things weren't just constantly chaos and constantly happening, and you weren't inundated every moment with information bombardment. But really, since high school, when people really just started spending a lot of their time on the internet, where it's just a ubiquitous thing, and then right after, once we got smartphones, because we graduated 07, 08.
Yeah.
And that's right when the iPhone came out. That was right at the birth of the smartphone era.
Yeah, I remember I got a cheap smartphone. I forget what it was called, Citrus or something. They gave it to me for free. And I was able to surf the internet just a little bit. And I mean, it wasn't quite fast enough yet, but it was still pretty cool.
I remember when the iPhone first came out, I was just like, wait, I can Google something anywhere, anytime?
Well, we can connect this back to the movie. So the ability to have the internet in your hand gives you an extension of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So you can know any fact at any time. I don't know the answer to that, so I can Google it, and I can not only get the answer, but I can have a comprehensive understanding of that area of knowledge.
Yeah, there's portals to all. There's links to all the related content within it. You know,
right.
The way the
social
internet
culture or academia. You know, and this has the ability to do that to the next level.
Yeah, you will actually experience these things. You'll actually understand what it means to be this or to do that.
Right. You could. I mean. First off, you could say jobs. I think I said earlier, I mean, you could learn to become a surgeon in an hour or something.
Well, she did a year and a minute, so...
A year and a minute, so... Right, so, I don't know, 10 minutes or something.
Right?
But...
Maybe space it out over the course of a day and just take 1 minute, take a break. Another minute, take a break.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it absolutely has the ability to. It's the gift of immortality. You can have.
It would evolve the species like that. Can you imagine if everyone all of a sudden knew how to program, or everyone had all of this knowledge at their fingertips, and then they also had the ability to do work to evolve? Because I mean, she was taking notes while she was under. And thinking about the progressiveness of the technology to the point where she actually coded in her sleep in this reality. So, I mean, she could have come out and made...
She coded the solution to her brother's problem in her reality, but it still failed.
Well, in her fake reality that she created.
Yeah.
But she coded the ability to control... the experience. She found out how to code it.
Yeah.
Through her lucid dream.
There's even a little nod to that before she goes under. They mention someone talking about like getting out of comas, and she says someone figured out how to work through their code and get out of their coma. And like, so that's something that as soon as she was in the prison, I knew she was gonna break out of this.
Huh.
Like they had foreshadowed it like right there before. When she first broke out, the first thing she sees is where her cell has been kept and where the power lines are and then where the food has been kept. Like all of the most obvious things of what would need to take place for this thing to exist. It's similar to this this theory that I was hearing about on sort of the human capacity for creation. You know, the further we look into the atom, the more things we find. Like, is there a fundamental particle to the universe, or do these things come apart because we look deeper into them?
Huh.
You know, so we find what we expect to find, like the Higgs boson just recently. So as she breaks out of this thing, she finds what she expects to find in all things in that trip that she has. She finds where she was kept and how she was being kept and who put her there and why they put her there. And she comes to terms with the man she killed, and her father she seeks help in, which she hasn't been doing. It's all this projection.
We didn't talk about that as far as her father, which I thought was really interesting. I mean, she clearly is estranged from him. She had a very tight relationship with him, and not only that, an academic relationship with him, but they differed as colleagues. And then that created a rift in their own relationship.
Her father
and daughter.
The dream state says, you stole my work, basically. So that's like her acknowledging that within herself.
Yeah.
And trusting her father for his help and advice, is what she needed in the real life. So in the real world. So this whole thing was like this just expansion of what she needed to understand in herself in her real life to find peace.
Things that she knew, but she wasn't consciously acknowledging to herself, but she was able to finally face once her reality was completely her own. Once again, going back to discovering things as she's imagining them, like making connections and creating her reality around her when she breaks out of the prison. This was just kind of a cool effect, I thought. So in the very beginning, you see her day one in the prison, and it's just a box, and then around her is darkness. Like there's nothing else there. It's just space.
Mm-hmm.
And then she breaks out, which is kind of like a womb sequence. She's pushing against this plastic and,
you still
pushing her
kind of
fingers
see that darkness around there.
There's darkness, even when she's pushing through the plastic. And then all of a sudden, I'll have to go back and listen to it again, but there's almost like a light switch flick, and then it's daylight, and she's in a factory or like a warehouse.
Well, first you hear that wind,
Right. You hear the wind. She starts to get the idea in her head. She pushes through the womb, and then that darkness becomes light. And she created a world like that.
Yeah. It's death and rebirth, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
She is escaping from hell.
And creating a new kind of hell, sort of. But
creating a new reality for her to find her way out of again. There are some people who say that's all existence is trying to find out how to get out of this, right? I mean, that's the Buddhist take of reincarnation, is we're all just trying to figure out how to not exist anymore.
Well, become part of something greater, right?
Be reabsorbed, yeah.
I guess that goes more into Hinduism. But,
yeah, that's more.
I mean, Buddhism was an offshoot of that, sort of. Yeah. Even though you can be Buddhist and be any other religion or not religious at all.
Yeah.
I think we've covered everything. I don't usually like to complain, but I think that one of the things that bugged me was just that as soon as a technology like this existed and a company like this created a thing that allowed you to do this kind of stuff, this virtual reality, but to the next level, this, making your own memories, they would be drowning in money.
If it
everybody
worked,
would want to get on this.
The government would take this over very quickly. The implications of this are too large.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, this guy who's apparently in federal spending for military. I guess he wasn't military. Corrections spending.
Which, why not the military?
Right. The military would jump on it too.
I felt like it was a very, it was sort of an ideological implant into the movie. It wasn't necessarily how things would unfold, just kind of what the writers wanted to get across thematically.
Yeah.
Because it allowed for the whole prison sequence to happen and all of that. But I did have the thought, the only way this would not be picked up by the government is if this was in the future where things are just happening so much that the government really can't keep track of all the change anymore. But it's 2017, so that's why it's unbelievable.
That's... Well, it's totally possible too, right? I mean, things are happening at quite an incredible rate.
We're living in that period now.
The government is having trouble keeping up with all of this stuff.
The rate of change, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of technologies are really causing disruption in the world. Not good or bad, just disruptive.
I mean, I suppose everyone says that every moment in history, it's always a crazy time to live. There's always something incredible going down in history. It's never a boring moment in time.
Because we're always moving forward.
But this particular moment is much more powerful, I'd say, than any other a moment in history.
Absolutely. The internet is a huge thing. It changes the way things work.
Yeah.
In a big way.
In every conceivable way.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Couch Theater. My guest and our creative consultant is Greg Dernbach. Artwork by Robot, who you can follow on Instagram at 20th Century Robot. All episodes are written and produced by me, Stefan Cowper, along with a few questionable bass lines. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen to us on YouTube, or you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all under Couch Theater. We hope that you enjoyed this week's episode and that you come back next week for another movie and another conversation.